She had just finished her exams, final exams for the semester, and I picked her up, and that's when it all began. Things, things were just bizarre when I picked her up, but I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was going on.
Do you remember that? Do you remember? What did it feel like for you?
So for me at the time, I had no idea what was going on. I thought it was just, lack of sleep since it was finals week and, kind of just jumping all over the place, trying to get my assignments turned in, trying to like stay social with people, trying to do 1,000,001 things at once. And like in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, something was off. Like I never slowed down. I didn't even need to sleep, which was crazy. And so I was just really confused by everything. And looking back, and obviously now I have a diagnosis, it was mania at the time. And mania is just like this euphoric high. And, you don't get it from drugs or anything. It's literally just your brain is just kind of going haywire. And it's so hard to explain because you feel like you're superhuman and you feel like you can do anything without like even thinking of the circumstances. And it's just like any idea I had, and they were constantly coming. I was like, I can do that. Like, I can be in an a cappella group. I may not be able to sing or anything, but I can be in an a cappella group. I can drop out of school and do this. And it just like so many different things that I was like, I know I can do that. Obviously, I didn't end up doing all those things, but like in that moment, anything was possible to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that was your junior year of college, you said?
So that was my
second year.
Second year, first semester of college.
And nothing that you saw beforehand.
Well, in high school, so the transition to high school from a small Catholic school to the public high school, we kind of, we thought it was that transition that was tough. You know what I mean? Huge differences. And so she had been diagnosed with depression. Looking back, it was so obvious that she was depressed, but it took kind of very obvious symptoms to be thrown in our face for us to realize what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so depression diagnosis by probably Christmas of 9th grade. And so then that's when it all started.
Mm-hmm.
And so then
Depression diagnosis, eating disorder,
and
then eventually it escalated to she was cutting, and we didn't discover that until senior year of high school, and it was very alarming. It was kind of hit us out of the blue, and then she went away to college, and really was like any other freshman until sophomore year. And then that sophomore year, I can remember it vividly, where Susanna came home and said, there's something wrong with Alexa. And we had family travel plans over that holiday weekend, which
Christmas
over that holiday week and that turned into her first psychotic break and an admission to the hospital, and we ended up changing our plans and visiting her and spending Christmas and New Year's in the hospital, which was completely new to us.
Yeah. How scary was it?
Really scary.
Definitely.
Yeah, from your standpoint as a brother, a younger one.
The youngest.
What would you say?
Well, at first I didn't really know. Like I had depression in middle school, but I didn't know what was really going on. But then as we went to go visit in the hospital, I kind of had an understanding, and it changes the way you look at life, like after you see all of it. And it's crazy because not everyone knows what exactly happened or what what happens with bipolar, but I don't know, it's just crazy just witnessing it.
And that psychotic break, what exactly was that?
I feel like, so I actually have been hospitalized 3 separate times, and each time was actually increasingly worse, and each time was a manic break. Thankfully, I haven't been hospitalized, for severe depression or anything, even though that's been bad. But the mania was what has always put me in the hospital. And so, the first time was just so surreal. And the first time I call like my happy mania, because I got into the hospital, I'm like, you guys are my best friends. Like, we all like clicked. Because when you're manic, like, you just feel like you connect with everybody, even though the other person could be like, oh my gosh, like, what was she even talking about? Like, but when you're manic, you literally see, the good pieces of everything, or at least that first time for me, that's how it was. So it was very dreamlike and very, just a happy, like, I remember it was just like a good, like, I was very artsy, like, I've always loved art, so then, like, this artistic side, like, this new artistic side came out. Like, I've always loved dancing, so I was like dancing in the hospital, just like pretty much doing everything. But then, like, each hospitalization was worse, and so, like, I remember my third one, I was so mad at everyone. I was mad at the doctors. I was refusing medication. Like, it just totally changed over time. So my experience with hospitals, or that one hospital, and just hospital visits in general, like, is very all over the place, because I've
And I will say, for us, that first hospital stay, was so traumatic for all of us because, first of all, we had no idea what was going on. We didn't understand anything, and the fact that our Christmas Day was going to a psychiatric hospital, it was life changing, and so we thought that was the worst. And so, the thing with mental illness, with severe mental illness, is that it takes a while to figure out what medicine is going to work for this person, what combination of medicines. So looking back, it took a while to figure out. So it was really over a 12-month span that she had these 3 hospital stays. And the second 2, we had to do temporary detaining orders. And if we thought the first hospitalization was traumatic, those second and third ones were really terrible. And that's the last thing you want to do, is to say, please, police, go find our daughter and put her in handcuffs and take her.
And it's terrifying when you're in that, like, so the second and third times, I like tried to book a round trip to Costa Rica, and, like, just so happened that I had to find another ticket, to get this deal. So, like, another person to go on this trip with me. So I was like, I'll just go find my husband, I guess. Like, I wasn't dating anyone, but I was like, you know what, that's a sign. I need to go find my husband by sundown tonight, and we're gonna go on this trip together. And when you're manic, like, these things just come into your head and you roll with it. Like, you just go. And so then I was like, oh, I won the lottery, so this is fine. Like, we got this. So then it was, like, on my mind to, like, find this man. And so, like, I was just running around all over the place.
Unbeknownst to us, the doctors, her team, were trying to figure out the right medicine for her. So it was a work in progress. And so, unbeknownst to us, she had gone off her medicine, but her behavior was getting more and more bizarre. Just very bizarre. Like, I had to go to each of the neighbors, the adjacent neighbors, and say, listen, if you see anything that's kind of off going on at our house, this is what's going on. And the ironic thing is, the neighbors next door, across the street, each one of them had their own story to tell me once I
That
said.
they could relate to.
Exactly. And I was like, I had no idea. Well, we had no idea. So she was kind of roaming the streets, and he had gone down, signed the emergency custody order because we knew things were just escalating. And then we had gotten a call from the police, and she had been kind of not in Kempsville, but on Virginia Beach Boulevard, but
Like
near
some
a
shopping center.
near a motel, but in the middle of the night digging through the dumpsters that God was telling her to recycle. And the police officer called us and said, she gave me your number. She said you would tell us what was going on. And I was like, thank you for calling us. And he brought her back here. And then, everybody else had to come. But, there were times that my husband would come home, and then Alexa thought my husband was the devil. And so she got out her mace. She didn't spray him, but that's what her mind was telling her.
Yeah.
And so, her brothers, they would want to have friends over for whatever reason, go out on the boat, watch TV. And I was like, I have no idea what's going to go on. I don't know what's happening. So please don't have anybody over. Once Alexa got out of the hospital, someone had told us about the National Alliance on Mental Illness, our local affiliate, that they had these classes that they offered for free.
Yes.
And so they called, and I was like, oh, my husband works all the time, but I'll take the class. And they were like, you and your husband have different perspectives on this. Men and women see things differently. I was like, really? So they said, we really want both of you to take it. So we both took this 12-week class. We had never heard of Nami, but good grief, that was eye-opening. Because and it was, even though it wasn't a support group, this family-to-family class, just everybody's, I think like maybe 20, 25 people were in that class. And we thought our story was serious. Everybody's stories seemed so much worse than ours. But people were listening to our story saying, wow, that's intense. But everybody who told their story, whew, they were doozers.
And I guess during that time and before that, you probably thought,
We're alone.
where is this going to go and what's going to happen?
You don't know what you're dealing with, why you're dealing with it, or where it's going to go. And I think that's the scariest part about all of this, because all of a sudden our happy-go-lucky family was struck down, and now it's a reality check where now we have our oldest child in the hospital dealing with a new diagnosis that we know nothing about. We don't know anything about the resources, and the system is just not user-friendly. And we gained a lot from our own experience as far as the CIT officers.
But we learned that through Nami.
But we
had no
learned
idea.
that it's trial by fire, unfortunately. You don't have a number where you can pick up the phone and say, there's something wrong with my child, and what do I do? The resources aren't there, and it's a scary thing, and it's a very disruptive thing. Mm-hmm. And if one thing that we've learned from all this is that there are resources, they just have to be, they're not readily known, but they have to be, but
We need to get it out.
we have to get that out, and the public knowledge has to be accessible to these. They need to know that there are accessible resources.
Did you ever have problems getting her into the hospital? Because she has to be assessed by a clinician.
Correct.
First.
Yes. So the whole system was so new to us. We had no idea that she had to be assessed and then determine whether she was competent or whether she wanted it voluntary versus involuntary, whether you need to have a temporary detainment order issued, and the avenues you had to go to obtain that. And it is, your world is all of a sudden in a whirlwind, and you have no idea what the resources are.
I will
And it's a
say
complete-
we lucked out because my friend who lives 2 doors down, really good friend, and when I picked her up from that Christmas break during the second year of college, it was the second day she was home, and I just drove into her driveway, and I was like, I just don't know what's going on. And she's the one. She used to, many years ago, used to be in charge of the volunteers at the Virginia Beach Psychiatric Hospital. I think it was named something else then. And she said, you can call this number, 627-LIFE, 24/7. And we were such in still denial. We're like, no, we're going to get through this. And I was like, Teddy, I have this number. He's like, no, we'll make it through this. We'll get through this. And then the next day, I was like, I'm calling this number. And he's like, good. And while I'm calling them to say, this is what's going on, what do we need to do? And it just so happened while I was talking to the one of whoever answered the phone and was giving me advice to come down, one of my sons, I don't think it was you, Luke, one of my sons walked in and went, what is going on with Alexa? She's crazy. And I was like, okay, sorry for that break-in.
Trip.
And so then for that first mania, Alexa was so eager and happy. Not always.
I thought it was a sleepover.
She was all excited. And on our way to the hospital, because she was convinced, she's so smart, she was convinced she had a concussion. She knew something was wrong with her head. And she was convinced she had a concussion and that she needed to get her brain scanned.
That was the only thing that made
sense.
Because it's like my mind was hurting. Like, so many thoughts, and that's why I couldn't sleep. So, like, so many thoughts were going through my mind, like 1,000 miles an hour. I was just like, I had this constant headache, and I was like, it honestly feels as if I have a concussion. Like, I feel lightheaded, and all of it was literally just because my mind didn't know what to do with all these thoughts. And it was just, I was like being run by a motor, and it was very
But
weird.
I will say, we have medical insurance. We are a tight family. We were able to be there to be Alexa's biggest advocates, which is something we learned with Nami. Like, I think we were fortunate with the system because we learned. I've talked to a lot of families, witnessed a lot of families who are majorly struggling, and I realized, looking back on our case, we really did luck out because so many people, so many families have had such a different outcome and are still struggling. And so we really did fight hard for this awesome recovery that she has.